years. Can you imagine? 22 years. A lot of the youngsters don't even know Guantanamo exists. You know, it came after they were born. Some of the older people think, what? It still exists? It's still there? I can't believe it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being in a prison where you know you've done nothing wrong? Most of the people in there have done nothing wrong. They were just picked up at the wrong place, the wrong time, or because a neighbor got a reward from the American government if they denounced somebody next to them. Can you imagine just the families, the communities, their lives, the loss of hope? It can't go on. We must stop it. And we want justice. So Amnesty has been fighting to close Guantanamo for years now, and I hope it will stop soon. It will be closed. It's about time. 22 years. That's it.
Well said. Thank you very, very much, Lise.
It is the British government's declared policy that Gitmo should be closed, but President Biden is having great difficulty in achieving that. Biden can be helped by British support, which means the government, together with other European countries, agreeing to accept one or more of the prisoners held for so long without charge for resettlement. In doing this, the government would at least be accepting some responsibility for the so-called war on terror and its terrible consequences. The complete lack of accountability by government must be overcome, but the tremendous national demonstrations in support of the Palestinians and other actions across the country do augur well for the future, because they show the power of collective action. They give us an idea of what could be achieved if we act together, if we act in solidarity with others. And so government attempts to dodge their responsibilities and suggest that non-British nationals such as Ravil Mingasov are a matter for the US and the other nations are unacceptable and must be challenged. They must be challenged and overcome, particularly in the case of Ravil, who has family members residing in Britain. So we must continue campaigning, building support for Gitmo closure, challenging the government to accept its responsibilities and to be constantly proactive on this issue. And I think we must also keep on trying to get access to ministers via the closed Guantanamo all-party parliamentary group, which I think is already working well. Finally, friends, although it may seem a thankless task, we must also keep on with the letter writing to the PM, the Foreign Secretary and President Biden. And don't forget to write your MP and urge them to attend the APPG meetings for closure of this terrible Guantanamo detention facility.
Thank you very much, Dave. And I've actually just want to introduce somebody else here today who I'd like to read a poem for us. That would be fantastic. Do you want to come just over here a bit?
Guantanamo is to the world's eternal shame, all based on revenge and politicians' political power game. Aging prisoners continue to suffer day in, day out, while determined campaigners sustain their shout. Some
were corralled, sold off, and shuttled into cages. Many had committed no crime but fleeing persecution. Excuse me, guys. Are thousands of miles away from their families and were submitted to untold acts of brutality and degradation. And every year since then, every year that I have experienced joy, happiness, anticipation, love, heartache, every year that I have lived
779 men have suffered in the odious clutches of Guantanamo. That they have been so cruelly stripped of what we take for granted so easily is nothing less than a moral stain on the United States and its allies. That men should be held without charge, not knowing the reason for their detention, denied the most basic human right of a future, profanes the values of justice and democracy that camp was purportedly set up to defend. Now, as a young member of this movement, I give this solemn pledge, not only to the men still suffering inside Guantanamo's walls and held elsewhere in confinement across the world, but to those who have spent their lives fighting for its end, that I, and many of my generation, will never cease the struggle to close its gates, will never stop standing in solidarity with those suffering under its tyranny, and will never relent in the fight for their liberation. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you very, very much, Aaron. That's fantastic. Thanks, it's very inspiring.
Yeah.
And I'd like to pass it over to another one of our young activists, Harry McWhirter.
Okay, never used one of these before, so I hope this works. Guantanamo Bay has now been open for more than 22 years. The US have lost interest in punishing Iraq and punishing Afghanistan, and yet they still choose to punish people who did no wrong every single day. They punish these men brutally without consideration for any human rights or human dignity. There are people who chose to give up their time to march with us today who weren't born when Guantanamo Bay was opened, or, like me, who were too young to realise what all of this meant. But we have gathered here regardless to demand that this finishes now, that this isn't done in our name, to shape the future that we want to live in. I would like to say a few words on behalf of the Activism Project. We're aiming to build a worldwide community based on remembrance, resilience and resistance. We are looking to grow awareness, to teach young people about what has happened and expand the reach of the vigils and the other actions that we take. We are looking for connections with other groups across the globe who will join us. Every single person, by doing as much or as little as they can, adds their voice to strengthen our call, which will be heard in Parliament, down the corridors of the White House and through the camp itself. Remembering is a community effort, and we are making sure that everyone knows that Mansour's brothers are not forgotten there. We are here today to memorialise harm and injustice and to mourn ongoing pain and suffering, but I don't think that's all. I think we're also all here today because we hope and we dream together. We hope that the world will open its eyes and see that the terrible acts committed in the name of safety, security, and the next generation must end. And those involved must face the justice that they denied all of those they detained. We dream that President Biden will be remembered as the president who finally ends the ongoing trauma of Guantanamo and releases those still held there, freeing them to return to the people and the places that they love. Every day of this struggle has been uphill, but with the voices of those here today and all of those around the world who support this cause, we will reach the top of that hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you very, very much, Harry, and the work of